Okay, so in this video we're going to talk about some basic things and then move on to some more difficult things. But these are definitions that you should already know. Perpendicular bisector, a line or a segment that divides the segment into two congruent parts, and, keyword being and is perpendicular to a given segment. So we've done compass constructions before where we have a perpendicular bisector. We know that gets cut in half, and we also have a right angle right there. So that's an important thing about perpendicular bisectors. An angle bisector, the next one. So if I have an angle bisector, let's say this is 60 degrees in total, the angle bisector would come through the middle and cut it into two angles that are 30 degrees each. The next one, the median. A median is drawn in a triangle and cuts the base into two congruent parts. So these two would be congruent. We don't know anything about the angles on a median, but in the case of an altitude, we do know something about the altitude. The altitude is going to come down and make right angles with the base. So it's important that altitude is perpendicular and that median basically goes to the middle. Now, in the next slide or on the back, we're going to talk about some other. The first one is points of concurrency. Please go ahead and copy that down because that is not written on your paper. So for a point of concurrency, that is where three or more lines, segments, or rays all intersect. So that's important. There are a couple of points of concurrencies within triangles that you need to know, and we're going to take a look at those now. So the first one is the centroid, and these are really just definitions. We'll kind of talk about these as we go through them, but in a centroid, it is, in fact, the intersection of the medians, and it always splits the segment into a ratio of 1 to 2, so we will talk about that as we progress. The next thing is the orthocenter. So in the orthocenter, it is going to be the intersection of the altitudes. Kind of important that we understand that. And it could be inside on or outside the triangle. Please make sure you copy that. The next thing is the incenter. So the incenter is the intersection of the angle bisectors. And what's cool about this is that you can inscribe a circle inside the triangle from the incenter. That's not something you could do from these other points of concurrency. We'll talk about that with a compass as we progress through the week. And then the last one here is what we call the circumcenter. And the circumcenter is, in fact, the intersection of the perpendicular bisectors. And this is the most important thing, that it could ultimately result outside of the circle. So most of them are inside the circle, but the circumcenter could be outside the circle, and also the orthocenter could be outside the circle. So keep that in mind. When it talks about outside the circle, it's usually either the orthocenter or the circumcenter. And then the next thing on the next page, please go ahead and copy it. So copy this picture. I'll give you a second to copy it and then we'll talk about it. So in this picture, this is showing the centroid, which is in fact the intersection of the medians. Now the intersection of the medians actually does something pretty cool. It splits the median into a ratio of 1 to 2. If I was to look at this median right here, let's say I knew that this piece was 5, I would know that this piece was in fact 10. So that's in a ratio of 1 to 2. On this second median right here, let's say I knew that this was in fact 14, the larger piece, then I would know that the smaller piece was in fact 7. Again, a ratio of 1 to 2. And then the last one, which is the most important and probably the most difficult, if I told you the length of this entire thing, and I'll call this D, and I'll call this intersection E right here, if I told you that DC was in fact 30, then what I have to do is realize that DE would be x, and EC would be 2x, and then I can write an equation to figure it out. 2x plus x equals 30, 3x equals 30, x is equal to 10, so the smaller piece is 10, and in this case the larger piece would be 20. You might realize that if you are given the entire length of the median, in this case it's 30, you would divide by 3 to get the two parts, one of them being 10 and the other one being 20. That's it for this video. Thanks, and I'll see you in class.